Thanks for joining us for this episode of Coffee with Closers, where business leaders share insights on how to build businesses from the ground up and best practices for innovating in their industry.
Hey, Charlie, I'm super excited to have you join me for this episode of Coffee with Closers.
Awesome. It's a pleasure to be here.
Most certainly. So obviously, for the audience that may not have heard of you, can you share a little bit about who you are?
Sure. Been an entrepreneur since the age of 4, and then have had businesses all the way throughout. Created my first real business, I guess, right out of college. I was selected by Ernst & Young as one of the best seed stage companies in America. Then went on, created my first multi-million-dollar business at the age of 24. Then I've run the gamut of all different sorts of businesses until 2010. Somebody said, hey, could I pay you to help me grow my business? And then I sat back and said, people actually pay me to help them grow their business? And then I started Predictable Profits. And for the last decade, I've been coaching both 7- and 8-figure entrepreneurs and helping them scale their business to that next level using a variety of different marketing and sales strategies.
Awesome. You're a serial entrepreneur, like you just described, from the age of 4. You're an author, speaker, advisor. You've accomplished a lot in your career so far. What is the one thing you're super proud of?
That's a really good question. I tend to think that as an entrepreneur, there's been many downs. Sometimes really, really down to the point where it wouldn't take very much to just break you at that point. And just being able to go from those low periods to bouncing right back up again. Those are the times that I'm really, really proud of. Just running the gamut of different enterprises. I guess I've had the unique opportunity of being in that spot, 2-3 times in my life. Just bouncing back up. I'd say on a personal level, that's what I'm really proud of. On also a professional level, I do have to give a hat tip to my team. My team makes me better. Mm-hmm. So, I'm extraordinarily proud of working with them.
Awesome. Obviously, you've been at this since your age 4. What is the why behind what drives you?
A lot of people have these large external whys, and I love that. People like Richard Branson, who are looking to change the world. But when I look at it in terms of myself, for me, I've always kind of felt like I knew what my potential was. And that driving factor is more so I wanted to prove to myself that I was capable of everything that I felt I was capable of achieving. And so for me, it's much more internal than it is external. And at the same time, it's not that I don't have these views of changing the world. I actually do believe that. I believe that you get paid in direct proportion to the value that you put out there. So I'm a huge proponent of adding value and changing the world in many ways. But that why is just making sure when I get to those pearly gates at the end of the day, that, I can say I literally did give it my best. I'm proud of who I've become.
Most certainly. And I think the very fact that helping entrepreneurs, because I think entrepreneurs are changing world one entrepreneur at a time, right? So I think they're all out there creating jobs, doing cost-based, whatever product development or services, right? So I think in that sense too, helping entrepreneurs is a big why at the end of the day. So every entrepreneur has a story of, overcoming obstacles to become who they are. And I think you have a very interesting story of how you got to where you are, right? Can you share that entrepreneurial journey and how has that been for you?
Yeah, there are so many, I feel like there's been so many beginning points for me, right? But one of the defining moments of who I am today, not a lot of people know that I was diagnosed with major learning disabilities. When I was a kid, my mother had me tested, and I guess I was in a weird position where I heard the doctor tell my mother about my learning disabilities, and she said I had one of the worst cases of learning disabilities that she had ever seen. In fact, she was surprised I could even go to a regular school. Now, for me at that point as a young kid, that was devastating to hear that news. My mother, she was intuitive enough to change the narrative and really just tell me how amazing this gift is, because now I can see things so much differently than everybody else. And that really, I didn't understand it at the time, but now when I look at where we've come today, and part of the reason why we've been as successful as we are is because I can look at businesses and opportunities and whatnot and see things slightly differently than everybody else has been able to see it, because our brains work totally differently. And I would say, as far as overcoming my challenges, that would be one challenge that I've overcome that was my weakness that has later been transformed into my superpower.
Yeah, and I think every entrepreneur has some level of, some sort of a personal struggle that they deal with, right? Sometimes it's interpersonal skills that they're just an introvert, but they're super good at, coming up with innovative ideas and things like that, right? I think even Steve Jobs is kind of one of those people. So I think, yeah, that is definitely what probably makes you who you are, and giving you the skills and the knowledge that you have today to be able to build a company and write the books and things of that nature.
I would like to think so anyway. I would like to think so.
So obviously, you've written the book called, Predictable Profits. You kind of talk about 3 P's in your book, right? So one is positioning, products, and then obviously promotions. Positioning is something that we often hear people talk about. Hey, you got to have a good positioning statement, all of those things, right? And so can you elaborate on that a little bit more? Because obviously, in surface, it seems very simple, but it's not. In theory, it's a lot more complicated than that, right?
So one of the cancers that's affecting every business today is commoditization, right? And so from a positioning standpoint, we want to be able to position ourselves as uniquely different. Now, one of the questions that we talk about even in pricing is, what needs to happen in order for you to be the most expensive competitor in the industry and still have people lining up to do business with you? A lot of that has to do with positioning. Look, people do business with, celebrities and industry experts and so forth. Are you positioned yourself as a premium provider? Are you positioned yourself as a cheaper, lower expensive provider? So, positioning plays a really big part. Now, if we go to it on a deeper level, the average person is going to look at between 12 and 14 of your competitors, before making a buying decision. So from a positioning standpoint, if I'm going to compare you against your competitors, how are you positioned? Are you positioned as the obvious choice? Am I if I look at you versus another company, am I more likely going to select you, and for what reason? So, there's a whole component to positioning. That other component is PR and leveraging the media. It's one thing for my advertising to say one thing about me. It's another thing for somebody else to say something about me, which is also very important. But now it becomes even more influential when we have, other media sources like, Fox Business or Forbes or whatnot that are now talking about me. Now, that elevates my positioning to something that is, far greater than people who don't have those equal resources. Because we live in a world where we're actively doing research, we have to have those positioning elements around so that when we're doing research, that we're positioned better than our competitors. We're positioned as a leading expert and authority. We're positioned in such a way that we can get more premium pricing.
Yeah, I think the subject matter expertise really comes into play when you have 2 competing alternatives. You're going to choose the guy who has more expertise, or at least you can perceive to have more expertise.
Yeah.
And then again, you can demand the price. So are you in your in definition of positioning, are you talking about specialization as part of the positioning?
Well, yeah. I mean, if you look at specialization, the one example that's kind of been overused is the idea of doctors, right? Who gets more, a generalist or a specialist? GP, a general practitioner, or a heart doctor or brain doctor? And obviously it's the heart doctor or the brain doctor that is going to get, paid more. In general, when we're breaking from the commodity trap, and when a problem is big enough, we want to make sure that we're going to the people that we feel understand our problem and understand our situation. And so and typically speaking, we're going to gravitate over to the specialist. So, if you're looking for, if you're an agency owner and you're looking for somebody who can help you grow your agency, you're going to go to somebody, naturally who's got very detailed experience in working with agencies, So, I mean, there's countless examples like that where niching down a business helps to increase revenues. We had a company, when they started working with us, they were working with everybody under the sun. It didn't matter the industry. And they were doing about $1 million a year. One of the first things that we did is we niched them down into one very specific industry so they could be positioned as the leading authority in that industry. And within 1 year, they went from $1 million to about 5.6, then 11 point whatever. Then eventually, now they're well up over $20 million. And it started with that very foundational element of let's specialize. Specialization is, in fact, a growth strategy.
So I know vertical specialization is often the easiest thing to do. Hey, let's just pick a vertical where I know that I have the expertise, or I have prior case studies or success stories that I can leverage to win more deals. But then there's also the other side of industry specialization is where, in the event of COVID, we saw a lot of companies who just kind of specialize in a certain vertical may have suffered a lot. Let's just say, for example, in the space of tourism or travel or something of that sort, right? So what kind of backup strategy would you recommend that you do in those scenarios to make sure that you are protecting yourself from some sort of a massive downturn?
So when we are at an inflection point like COVID, we have a few options. You change the message to meet the market. You change the market to meet the message. You change both the market and the message, or you do nothing and you go in the corner and you pray and hope that things are going to change soon, right? So we have a client who's in the travel industry, and that is his market. He is solely travel. And so when COVID happened and the border shut down, he reached out to me and he said, so what do we do? How are we going to overcome this? And so he is in the travel industry. He gets paid when he puts people on a plane and ships them out of the country, right? So how are we going to make this company grow? So what we did is instead of changing the market, we changed the message, because people are still buying. You just have to figure out what is going to most appeal to that market. We changed the message. Now this company, he's in the travel industry. He started growing right off the bat. Week after week after week, he hit historical KPIs. His largest competitor went out of business within 3 weeks. He had another competitor several months later that got absorbed by $1 billion company. My client right now is, to the best of our knowledge, the #1 best producing travel agency in the entire world in his market. Mm-hmm. So, and that's because you changed the message. You don't always have to change the market. Sometimes you just have to change the message. There's plenty of opportunity in travel right now, just like restaurants. I mean, a lot of restaurants were saying, or you hear on the news, people aren't going to restaurants, they're having issues and so forth. And yet, we have a client in the restaurant industry that had, it wasn't the best producing revenue for his restaurant, but he said, we're on par. We're on par. Our food is doing awesome. We're doing great. So he adapted and did well. Another restaurant technology company, we work with somebody who manages restaurant technology. They're killing it. They're doing awesome. So again, you don't always, if your positioning is right, you don't always have to change the market. Sometimes you just have to change the message.
Makes sense. And I don't know if it was Gary Vee or someone mentioned in some past videos or something like that, where, you know, just like you're always thinking about the best case scenarios, you have to think about the worst case scenarios and possibly even try to put yourself out of business and see what would you do in that scenario? How would you react, or what strategies would you employ in those circumstances? I mean, I don't think anybody even expected something like COVID would happen in such a short time, right? And completely change the landscape of how people do business today. Like even you and I are doing this video call, which I used to do mostly in our office, and now completely changed my game, which actually has given me more opportunities with people like you, which I would never have thought about unless, you know, something like COVID were to happen. So
well, if we could actually talk about the promotion side for a minute, right?
Mm-hmm.
So, you know, we talked the 3 Ps. The one is the positioning. The other one is pricing, which we just, you know, briefly touched upon. It's answering that question: what do you need to be in order to be the most expensive competitor in the market? Still have people lining up to do business with you, and there's, you know, a few strategies. You know, one of them is going to be you know, focusing on guarantees and different unique advantage points in that. But from a promotion standpoint, many people, I would say, of all the companies that I talk with, about 95% thereabouts generate all their business from 1 to 3 different sources of revenue. And the most common being word of mouth and referrals. When it came to one of the worst numbers in marketing, right? You don't want to ever have like one source of leads and one source of profits and so forth. And many times, especially, you know, in the agency world, we work with a lot of agencies, and a huge source of their revenue was events. They would go to events, they would speak at events, they would sponsor events, they would buy tables, they would network at events, and this became a massive source of revenue for them. The challenge is that you never want to have all your eggs in one basket, including events. And I can recall telling people, you know, we don't want to rely so much on events. Now, nobody ever would have predicted that events would have been shut down. It's just, you know, at some point, you just never want to rely on one thing. And I mean, lo and behold, events changed. And it was the companies that had these multiple sources of revenue, you know, multiple profit centers, that ended up doing really well. And the general rule of thumb is that you want to create 1 new profit center every quarter. So if you could have more profit centers, you know, the more robust your company becomes. If you look at a wheel, if you have one spoke in the wheel and that spoke breaks, you're done, right? But if you have multiple different spokes in the wheel, multiple different sources of generating leads and sales and so forth, if one of them doesn't perform as well, that's okay. You've got other ones that tend to get strengthened and do well. So yeah, I just wanted to bring that up.
And I think what I'm hearing you say is, you know, a lot of times businesses kind of rely on unpredictable and unreliable sources for business, right? And kind of in a reactive mode, just waiting for customers to come, more so through referrals or repeat business, and not on a proactive way, trying to find ways to get customers. So they're always, you know, kind of in a, hey, if customers comes, I'm growing. If not, I'm just sustaining my growth with my existing book of business. Whereas what you're describing is more so, hey, figure out how can you have multiple channels driving new business opportunities. So you are on an ongoing basis, you are not really scrambling for new customers.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I mean, if you're B2B, you want to have a combination of inbound and outbound, and that magic happens when they kind of overlap a little bit, right? If you're B2C, you want to have a combination of a multitude of different inbound strategies, paid media strategies, and also, and this works with B2B as well, partnership type opportunities. It's a huge market in partnerships that more often overlooked.
Yeah, and if we can elaborate on the pricing, I know we kind of just touched on it earlier. You were talking about competitive advantage, and can you expand on that a little bit more on the pricing concept?
Yeah, so you know, a lot of times when it comes to pricing, people have this inherent understanding that the reason why people aren't doing business with me is because I'm too expensive, right? So they immediately try to discount. When we go back to that question, what do you need to be the most expensive, yada, 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 and so if companies lining up to do business with you, you know, we look at the product and the service, and we start to eliminate all the risks. So what is the guarantees that you can build into your product and service that would give people that reassurance of knowing that if they do business with you, they're at least going to be taken care of. And then you can also add other elements like convenience and service and so forth. And you look at Nike, you look at Zappos, and I oftentimes reference Zappos when we talk about pricing because a Nike is a Nike is a Nike no matter where you're going to buy it. But Zappos won't compete on price. And so Zappos is oftentimes a more premium brand. In fact, I could go to the mall right now and buy a pair of sneakers and know that I can have it almost instantaneously versus when I buy on Zappos, I'm not going to be able to see it. I'm not going to be able to touch it. I'm not sure it's going to fit me, and I'm going to have to wait a day or two for it to ship in. And so if Tony Hsieh had said to me, hey, Charlie, I've got this great idea. I'm going to create this shoe company, and I'm going to compete against the local stores, and I understand people are going to have to wait to get their shoes. I understand it's going to be treated differently, but I'm going to solve all that because I'm going to give people upgraded shipping. I'm going to pay for their shipping, free shipping, and I'm going to do free returns up to a year. Both ways, free returns, free shipping. I would have said, hey, Tony, you've lost your mind. I would have put him in a straight jacket, thrown him in the back of a paddy wagon, and just been like, whoo, this guy he's crazy. But obviously, he would have proved me wrong in a massive way because he understood that when you eliminate the risk and you provide people additional, conveniences and so forth, that you can charge more premium pricing. So, he did that and he did a great job. And we've worked with other clients before. We helped them raise their rates to become the most expensive. And part of the way that we did that is we said, so what would happen? And there's a gentleman, he sells courses. Originally, he was selling it for $1,495 with a 15-day return policy. So I said, what happens if somebody actually puts your stuff to work? And he said, well, if they actually put this stuff to work, then what happens is they'll get, XYZ result. And I said, could you put your money where your mouth is? And he said, yes. So I said, let's change it. Let's do a 1-year guarantee. And if at the end of the year that they didn't get the result after putting this to work, you'll not only give them their money back, you'll also give them an extra $500 for putting their faith in you. So he ran that guarantee. His return rate went down from like a 30% down to a 2%. His revenues went way up, and he was able to increase his price from $1,495 to $2,500. So, just by adding other elements, and there's so many ways that you can compete without having a discount. You just want to make sure when you're doing your pricing that the focus is on the value that you're bringing people and not the price. If they're going back and forth going, I'm not sure that, I want to spend this money, it's because they're not focused on the price. And you got to take that attention. I mean, if they're not focused on the value, you got to take that attention off of price and onto value.
So then my question comes, especially, I know you described the product-based business where it's a lot easier probably to do returns and guarantees, where when a service has already been rented, it's a lot different, right? Where you had human capital invested into servicing a customer, it's a lot harder to do some sort of a return guarantee. So what would you recommend in those kind of a scenario?
So there's something that is called like a monkey's paw for sales. And that is basically a very small introductory type service that you provide to people, usually as a first step of doing business with you. And in my company, as an example, the monkey's paw that we use, if you work with one of my coaches, that oftentimes we'll say, okay, we'll get you started for 4 calls at a reduced rate. And at the end of the 4th call, if you don't have a measurable, quantifiable benefit, if you don't feel like this is the best investment you've ever made in your life, you just let me know and I'll give you all your money back. And we've ran that now for I don't even know how many years, and I can count on one hand the number of times that people have actually asked for their money back. And so that's how we do it in our own business. For other service related businesses, they'll say, we'll put together a roadmap. And if you don't find that this roadmap is worth at least 3 times more than you pay for it, you let me know and I'll give you your money back. But this is why, when in a service business, we don't sit around and just put an add to cart button and you can pay for it. And then all of a sudden now you can coach with us. It doesn't actually work that way. The first thing we have to do is qualify people. If we feel like we can definitely add a measurable, quantifiable benefit, then we'll extend the offer to work with people. So that's how we ensure that we can offer that guarantee, not just to the mass public. Same thing, if you're running another company, a service-based company, an agency, you want to interview these people, find out whether or not you can add value and how you're going to add value before you extend an offer with a guarantee. Mm-hmm. Look, there's so much competition out there. And what oftentimes makes a difference between whether or not I'm going to do business with you or not going to do business with you is an assessment of risk. Meaning, if I do business with you, what do I think my chances of losing money on this deal are going to be? And so take that risk away. We have a client that one of the strategies we used was actually to hold an event. Right now, obviously, that wouldn't work today because events aren't being run. But this is the first event that he had ever run before, and so he's like, "All right, how do we do this? The market is saturated, full of events. How are we going to do this?" While at the same time, I do want to be the most expensive in the industry. I want to have the most expensive event. So we ran an event, charged the most expensive ticket by far out of anybody else in the industry. And his guarantee was, you show up, it's a 2 or 3 day event, I can't remember. You show up, if at the end of the first day, you don't get at least $100,000 worth of value, let me know. I will give you all your money back and I'll pay for your ticket home. So it's like, people were like, all right, well, I mean, why wouldn't I do that? He's run this for a number of years. Not a single person has ever asked for their money back.
So in the service industry, are you a proponent of then productizing your service and somewhat, especially even if it's a customized service, somewhat productizing it to make it easier from a selling standpoint and also easier from a consumption standpoint?
Yeah, I mean, service is tough because you can't touch it, you can't feel it, can't smell it, like the whole deal. So in order to sell a service, many times you do, in fact, have to productize it so that people know what is the ultimate result I'm going to get as a result of working with you, right? So a lot of times you have to productize it if you want to increase your conversions.
Understood. And I know in your book and also in things that you've written about and talked on your podcast, you talk a lot about the concept of optimization and basically systematizing your business, right? So once you have kind of figured out your positioning, you have your pricing, you have your promotion kind of figured out, but then you also need to kind of make the business run right as a machine. So can you elaborate on what you mean by optimization and systematizing?
Yep. So there's the foundation. So I've invested over $500,000 traveling the world, studying billionaires, centimillionaires, and whatnot. And for me, it was always a frustrating point when, as a young kid, I always thought the secret to success was to work hard. And yet there were competitors who put less hours than I did into their business, and yet were seemingly making 10 times more. And so I read all the books, I took all the courses and whatnot, and I still couldn't figure it out. And that's when, as I studied all these other businesses, I realized that the 3 Ps were the foundation behind all of these like mega successful companies. And, but that's the foundation. Now, when it comes to scaling these businesses, right, that's where we focus on what you reference, which is first optimization, then systemization, and then innovation, right? So optimization, systemization, and then innovation. So the optimization is you already have a business. You're generating leads, you're generating sales. So you have to ask yourself, how do we do more of what's already working? That's the easiest, fastest way in order to scale a business. Let's do more of what's already working. So you identify the sources of momentum. Where are all the ways of generating traffic? Where are all the ways of generating leads? Where are all the ways of generating sales? And then find more ways to throw fuel in the fire. Then, because as an entrepreneur, I mean, Samuel, you know this, you're juggling a million balls all the time, right? You're a pretty busy guy, I have to imagine. Is that right?
That is.
So if I'm asking you to put even more on your plate, it's pretty daunting.
That's correct.
And so what happens when you look at a juggler and they're juggling 10 balls in the air at the same time and they happen to drop one? What typically ends up happening?
They will probably get distracted and start dropping more of those balls.
Right. And they drop them all. So that's where we take the optimization, we turn you in a finely tuned machine, then we systemize the systems and processes that and what's working, so that now that everything's more systematized and process driven, and the business becomes less dependent on you and less dependent on a few key personnel, that's when we go into that last step, which is innovation. And innovation is where you start creating industry firsts, brand new profit centers, and so forth. And you only do that at the end. Versus the way a lot of people tend to do this is they flip it on its head, and they start with innovation. They go, all right, you know what? I want to add more leads or whatnot. So let's start with building a new sales funnel. Let's start with this and that instead of looking at what's working. And so that's one way of doing it, but it costs you more time and more money doing it that way than if you started with optimization.
So can we expand on the systematizing aspect of it? Because that's the biggest breaking point of any business, because you can try to figure out how to get customers, you can try to figure out how to service them, but where it really, if it has to go beyond the business, the founder and the key leaders, right? You kind of have to really systematize. So how do you systematize the creative, critical thinking aspect of a business from just like some of the doing, right? Where it's like it doesn't really require a lot of mind involvement. So how do you systematize that part of it where you have creative thinking aspect is required?
So at the end of the day, and that's a great question, and it's a very common one, especially with different, like a branding agency or an advertising agency or whatnot, even a coaching company, right? Where, you put in your 10,000 hours and now all of a sudden it's like, all right, how are you going to go ahead and transfer that knowledge to other people? The ideal system is one that allows anyone with a base knowledge of experience to be able to produce consistent results. So let's look at what I just said, base level of experience. So if I'm going to bring somebody in, say, into a branding scenario, I want somebody with a base level of branding experience. But from there, we have to chunk it down and at the same time, look at, instead of one giant process, we want to look at these different micro processes that are involved. And so we look at, okay, when you're doing branding, what is the first step as a branding agency that you do in order to make decisions? And so, for many branding agencies, it's, well, we have to do a deep dive on understanding the avatar and this and that, so we can break down that process. And then whatever you found that has worked and not worked, and you create a library of resources of what's worked and what's not worked, with an explanation of here's why this has worked and here's why this has not worked. But the more you can chunk down your expertise and categorize it in a little bucket and say, this is when we do this and this is how we do it, that's where you tend to systematize more of that creative process. A lot of times when we're creating systems, because I believe in massive amounts of efficiency, what I'll do is I will turn on the screen share in my computer and I'm going to go through a process and I'm going to talk it through. And my assistant's name is Mike. So I'll say, hey, Mike, I'm going to walk you through how I'm doing this and why I'm making the certain decision. And so I'll take them step by step. This is what's going on. And Mike, my assistant, has a process for creating processes. So then he can take my recording and then he just goes through the process for creating processes and creates a new process and sticks it in our company wiki.
So it's a creative way to actually kind of scale your knowledge and expertise by just having someone else who can follow your thinking and then turn that into an actual process.
Yeah. Look, as an entrepreneur, I'm not trying to clone myself. If I cloned myself, then I would just be creating another competitor. Mm-hmm. Right? Because that's not what I'm seeking to do. But what I'm seeking to do instead is to say, okay, I need somebody with this expertise and this expertise and this expertise and this expertise. And I'm going to, instead of clone myself, I'm going to maybe divide my expertise into, 4 or 5 different areas. And I'm going to have people who do this in 4 or 5 different areas. Or maybe you're lucky enough and you can divide it into 2 or 3 different areas. But you don't just want to clone yourself. Now, as a business coach, we've developed IP, we've developed training, and we're able to get people on our team that can deliver world-class results. But at the same time, we're looking at, okay, world-class results, but it's layered on top of their existing experience. So they have that base level of experience. They've already run, $1 million organizations before. And so now we put the coaching on top of it. So we've layered on top of it, right? We're not taking somebody off the street who's, never run a multi-million-dollar business before and then saying, okay, look, I want you to, to be a coach. We're not going to get the results that we need. Mm-hmm. So that's why you've got to start with a base level of experience and then layer on top of it your own IP. Mm-hmm. I hope that answers your question.
Yeah, it does. And I think that's where I think the critical part is that base level experience. What is that base level experience, right? Trying to find out, hey, what's the happy medium? Someone recently graduated with maybe a year of experience. Is that sufficient? Or is it going to require someone with 3 to 5 years of hands-on experience being in the field or working with whatever that particular function?
I have a friend of mine. She's the COO of a multi-billion-dollar company. And she was taking off to France on a vacation. And I'm sitting there going, oh my gosh, like, I can't even believe you're going on, to France and for 2 weeks. I mean, how are you going to run your company? I'm guessing you're going to bring a laptop and your cell phone and everything else with you. And I mean, because she's got thousands of employees and the whole deal. She says, no, not at all. I'm disconnecting. I said, how are you going to do that? And she said, we have made it a decision, a policy in our company that all of our key personnel have to take off for a minimum of 2 weeks every year. And the reason why we do that is to make sure that there is no part of the company that's too dependent on any one person. Mm-hmm. And so it's really important that entrepreneurs consider the same thing. How many times have you met with a business owner where if the business owner gets sick or takes off or whatnot, that the business would come to a screeching halt? Or how many times have you spoken to a business owner where they have one salesperson, and if that salesperson quits, that all of a sudden that book of business goes with the salesperson, or there's nobody else that knows how to sell, or an engineer that has all the knowledge and the IP between their ears, that the business owner never took the time to create processes or systems or a wiki around that expertise. And so they put too much dependency on any one person, that when that person ends up leaving, it puts the company in a very vulnerable position. So we want to eliminate that vulnerability.
Yeah, and I think the common saying is, like, if you get hit by a bus, right, that test. So if this person gets hit by a bus, how would that impact your business?
It's interesting, though. I had an employee one time, this was many years ago, before I focused on systematizing my own business. I was in the Cayman Islands, and one of my employees called me up, and he said, why are you replying to my emails and taking my calls and whatnot? I said, well, I mean, because I'm working. And he said, why are you working? I mean, you've been working, all day. And I'm like, well, I recognize that, but I mean, hey, man, I'm the business owner. I have to be able to do this stuff. And he says, with all due respect, you're doing us a disservice. I said, what do you mean by that? And he said, the rest of us, when we go on vacation, we disconnect. And we don't want you calling us. We don't want you emailing us, the whole deal. And when you're not going on vacation, you're actually making us feel bad. In fact, I'm drew the short straw, and I've got to be the one to tell you that you're actually, not only are you making us feel bad, you're giving us the impression that you don't trust us. And I said, no, 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 I trust you. And he goes, you trust me? Do you promise me? You trust me? And I go, yes, no, I trust you. And he called me boss. And he goes, with all due respect, boss, you're fired. And I said, wait, what? And he said, I'm firing you for the week. You just told me you trusted me. I promise I will take care of everything. And if I have a problem, I have your cell phone number. Please do this for the company. You're fired. Go enjoy your vacation. Stop working. And so I had to honor his request. I stopped working. I think the biggest thing that surprised me, and it was a bit of humble pie, when I came back, the business was better off without me in it than when I was in it day to day. And the team really rallied together to work hard to show that they could, not only keep the business afloat, but make it even better than when I was doing it. We foolishly tend to believe that we're the only ones that can do certain things. And we're not. We're really, really good at one small piece of our business that is really it's our unique ability that allows our business to shine where it's at. But, that's our unique ability is a small component. Then there's stuff that we're excellent at, there's stuff that we're good at, and there's stuff that we suck at that we still end up doing. But we get confused. We think that our unique ability encompasses all the stuff that we're also just excellent at. But there are many people on the team that are also excellent and sometimes even better at it than we are. So if you look at a bottle, right, what stops the flow of fluid in a bottle?
It's the cap.
Right. It's a cap and it's the bottleneck.
Yeah, that's true.
And so the CEO, more times than not, is the bottleneck. They're trying to control so much of the day-to-day activities, so much of the decision-making and whatnot. You remove the bottleneck, and suddenly you've increased a massive flow of potential. The biggest thing that's oftentimes stopping entrepreneurs from getting beyond 7 figures is themselves. Right? It's pretty fascinating.
Yeah, and I think that controlling nature too, that they have that controlling nature to get involved in almost every decision sometimes, and the fear of letting go. Most certainly.
It's true. Look, I'm still guilty of it. I still catch myself. It's I guess it's the entrepreneurial disease.
That's possibly true. So I do have a bunch of rapid fire questions. So tell me a little bit about the mindset of an entrepreneur. What do you recommend as far as from a mindset standpoint?
I look at optimism is being critically important, and I'm going to go one step beyond that. When coronavirus happened, the first thing that we had to do is find ways where we could literally ask ourselves, why is now the best time in the world for our clients to be doing business with us? And I'm not just talking about me. I had my clients ask themselves the same question. So before you panic, before you do anything, I need you to ask the question, why is now the best time for your clients to do business with you? And for many of them that said, I don't know that now is. Then what needs to happen in order for now to be the best time? Always looking at where you want to go. You can't let the wake drive the boat. You can't be looking at, crap, the world has shut down. What are we doing? You look at what you can control. And so, okay, so what needs to happen? And so there's that element, right? So I kind of look at that as optimism, always looking forward, always asking yourself what needs to happen in order to get to that certain result. It's the same thing we ask ourselves every day. What's the most important thing that I need to be focusing in on right now? It's a very intentional mindset as opposed to a reactionary mindset. So being intentional is super focused. The other thing is gratitude. With every positive, there's an equal and opposite negative. With every opportunity, there's an equal and opposite challenge. With every challenge, there's an equal and opposite opportunity. So look at every challenge, no matter how big or small, get to that place of gratitude so that you can be centered enough to remove that emotion to be able to see where's the opportunity in this and so you can capitalize on it.
So what do you do for personal development?
Oh my gosh, I've invested in so many people, personal development. I traveled the world with Tony Robbins as a platinum partner. I've met his mentors. I've been business partners with his mentors. I've hired other coaches and gurus and so forth. At this point, for me, the biggest component of personal development, frankly, is gratitude. Look, I still every single day encompass challenges. Some challenges are bigger than others. Some challenges keep me awake at night. And even the ones that keep me awake at night, I will sit there and I will repeat over and over again, thank you, thank you, thank you. And I'm not thanking any particular person or God or whatnot. I'm being grateful starting with myself. And I'm like, you know what? No, thank you. Because there's a challenge that's going to help me become stronger, that's going to help me become better. One of the companies that I started in the past was a proprietary stock trading company, and we had millions of dollars that we ran in the markets. And so there's two sort of levels when you're running money in the markets. You have what's known as resistance, which is up high. So when a stock, before it reaches a brand new high, it hits a point called resistance. And then there's another thing called support. And support is before it breaks to a new low. And so a lot of times when you're faced with these challenges are that resistance. It's something that you're fighting up against in order to get to that new level. And so for me, I'm like, I try to get myself excited, like, yes, this means I'm getting ready to break into a new high. I'm hitting that point of resistance. I'm excited. I get myself juiced up because I'm like, resistance means a new high. Support is where you don't want to be. Support is exactly the way it sounds. It's when you've gotten to such a point that you're not breaking up to a new high until you have people rallying around you to try to pull you up from down below and support you and so forth. So challenges that come with the resistance, awesome. Be grateful. It means you're ready to break into a new high.
Leadership versus management, which one do you typically kind of fall into?
I would hope to say that I'm more of a leader. That's a better question from my team. But our motto is together we're better. Mm-hmm. I'm not a very good micromanager. In fact, I can't micromanage because I don't have that ability. Mm-hmm. So everybody runs their own little entrepreneurial section within the business. My job is only to help them do better at their job, to help them succeed. That's my only job, to help them succeed.
What do you do as a leader from a culture and vision standpoint to proactively ensure that you are building the high performance culture and that you are following the vision?
We have 3 rules in the company. The first rule is you can't give me or anybody else in the team a headache. Mm-hmm. So that everybody gets to say the same thing. My COO can say you can't give me or anybody else in the team a headache. My CRO can say the same thing. What that means is that they can go, everybody on the team, we don't tell them what time they have to show up for work, what days they have to work, how much vacation time they have. That's all on them. They could do whatever they want. But they have to have the right processes in place so that if they do want to go on vacation, to make sure that prospects are being followed up on, orders are being fulfilled, and all this other stuff. And so that's part of, you can't give me or anybody else in the team a headache. The next part is hit your mark. So I don't tell people what their mark is, how we're going to define success. Everybody defines their own mark. You just have to hit your mark. That's a condition of employment. The third part is really that together we're better. And so, we don't operate in a silo. We operate as a team. We rise as a team, we fall as a team. And so that's, a big part of who we are and how we work.
Do you have any productivity hacks?
Productivity hacks. I think my biggest productivity hack is every morning I ask myself the question, what's the most important thing that I need to do today in order to move the needle in the business, and more specifically referencing my goal. So, what's the most important thing that I need to do today in order to, and then you fill in the blank with your goal. That would be ultimately my biggest productivity hack because it makes my day and my time more intentional.
And knowing what you know today, what advice would you give your younger self?
Great question. I mentioned that I've ran multiple different businesses and done many different things. I've also gone and hit many different strategies and spent a lot of time in my younger days chasing every shiny penny, every way to make money, and every marketing funnel and every this and that. And I would have just really told myself, stick into one lane, master it, find people a hell of a lot smarter than you, and learn from them, and continue to find more and more smarter people and learn while staying in your lane.
Well, Charlie, thank you so much for your time, and thank you so much for sharing years of experience and wisdom with us. And we appreciate that. And thanks again.
Thank you very much.
This episode of Coffee with Closers is brought to you by One IMS, a leading digital marketing agency helping businesses win new customers. To request a free marketing ROI audit, please visit oneims.com. If you enjoyed this video, please share it. To make sure you never miss an episode, please subscribe.